Hello and welcome back to Make Do. David here with another build, this time for the new Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom. I've been making my own version of the Master Sword, basically taking all of my favorite elements from the various Master Sword incarnations and making my own fanboy version. But then Tears of the Kingdom came along. Luckily, I had already modeled the sword, so I just had to add a little malice to the blade and I could get printing. If you'd like to build along, these files are available for purchase over on our site, make432.com. These files are designed for easy assembly, require minimal to no support, and fit on most mid-sized 3D printers. So, let's get to work. My first step is to assemble the blade. Well, what's left of it. I start by sanding the large flat surfaces that will eventually be glued together. My goal is to roughen the surface up, so I use 80 grit sandpaper. This will create more surface area, creating a better bond when glued. I did end up using CA or super glue for most of the parts. I know, I should be using a stronger 2-part epoxy, but I was feeling impatient. I'm actually using a prototype file here. The files available for purchase have registration keys, so aligning the parts is much easier than what I had to do. Once I had the split pieces assembled, I could glue the blade segments together. These segments do have the registration keys I mentioned earlier. They are designed to fit standard 1.75mm filament, making it very easy to align the parts and give a little more strength to the bond. Big shout out to Super Daft Bros for turning me onto this method of designing 3D printed files. Be sure to check out some of their awesome projects. With the blade glued up, I can finally get to my favorite part, sanding. I took a short break from sanding to assemble the guard, again using the same registration method as before. After assembling, I filled any cracks with some spot fill putty and continued to sand. I followed up the rough sanding with some 2-in-1 filler primer. Then it was back to sanding, more priming, and more sanding, until I was happy with the finished product. Finally, it was ready for a little more sanding with some ultrafine steel wool. Okay, now all the parts were nice and smooth and I can move on to some more construction. I started by installing the blade core, which is a 1/4 inch threaded steel rod cut to 18 inches. It will run through the blade and eventually tie the blade in with the guard assembly. This is a leftover from the full Master Sword design I'm working on and isn't really necessary for the smaller Decayed version, but it does add a nice weight to the finished product and some strength. I did take the time to use some 2-part 5-minute epoxy to make sure the core is secure and doesn't wobble around on the inside. Having the core installed will also give me a nice handle while painting. Next up, I assembled the handle and guard. This is pretty straightforward with all the pieces simply slotting together. Again, I'm using some 5-minute epoxy to make sure everything is secure. I take a little extra time and make sure everything is aligned. I started with a hammered metal texture paint for the guard. This is not the final color, but it will give us a more interesting final finish. It also covers up any of those leftover layer lines. I followed that up with a coat of navy blue. That I ended up hating, so I repainted off camera, with something a little more purple. I'll link both colors below so you can use the color you like best. I also hit the blade with a coat of metallic silver. Now this looks great, but this is the Decayed Master Sword, so I have to do some weathering. I started by adding an almost organic raw metal texture using Mod Podge tinted with some black acrylic paint. I applied this mixture on pretty thick into all the recessed areas, making sure to keep things goopy and rough. And I ended up doing a few passes to really build up that texture. Once everything had dried, I went back in with some brown, black, and off-white acrylic paint, just to highlight that texture and add some color variation, mostly using a dry brushing technique to bring out some of the geometry from the print. For the rusted, grimy, decaying parts of the sword, I decided to mix up some Mod Podge, sand, and yellow paint. I slowly piled on this sandy mixture until I got the desired effect. This ended up looking just like the in-game model, and I am really happy with the results. For the handle wrap, I've always liked the idea of using actual leather. So I designed my files to have grooves to help guide the placement of 4mm wide leather strips. I cut 4 13-inch pieces and attached them to the top of the handle, trimming as needed to get a good fit. The design is a basic over-under weave, so I took my time and worked my way down the handle, gluing the leather in place. It is a really simple technique, but the results are stunning. Before I can do the final assembly, I just have some small gold details starting with these gems. The files are designed for FDM printers, but I decided to spoil myself with some nice resin prints, which only needed a little bit of sanding. Then I could apply some gold rub and buff. I used the same gold for these small metal details on the handle, using a Q-tip for a little more precision. Then I glued the gems in place on the guard assembly. With those in place, I can attach the blade to the handle, again using some 5-minute epoxy and sliding everything into place. When I first saw the Tears of the Kingdom trailer with the Decayed Master Sword, I knew I needed to make it, and I am so happy with the results. It was so strange to make something that was essentially ruined and not perfect, but it was really fun to play around with some new textures and some new techniques, and again, I'm just so happy with how this came out. If you'd like to make your own, we have the files available for purchase at make432.com. As I mentioned earlier, I am working on our ultimate Master Sword design. That will have the same guard and handle design with of course the full blade, so keep an eye out for those files soon. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.